I'm Kate Masters for the Frederick News Post, and this is Beyond the Ballot, a series of in-depth interviews with Frederick County's most recently elected officials. And I am here today with Sheriff Chuck Jenkins, who is just coming back from his recent re-election for his third term as Frederick County Sheriff. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kate. Actually, fourth term.
Fourth term.
This will be my fourth term.
I completely lost track because you were first elected in 2006. Is that correct?
This will be a fourth term.
Okay. Wow, fourth term, and that's a record, right?
You're the historical, unprecedented, first ever in Frederick County.
Okay. And I'm so glad that you're with us today. But I did want to ask, because I know that when you were first elected, a News Post reporter wasn't allowed into your campaign watch party, and I was wondering if you knew about that or if there was a reason for that.
You talking about the one just the other week?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I was unaware until after it happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did you know, would you have opposed a News Post reporter being there?
Actually, I would have made the same decision. I would have said, go away.
Oh, really? And why is that?
Because I don't think the News Post has been particularly fair to me through the election process. I've never felt like I've gotten a fair shake from the News Post. And so you know what? That was private party, my gig, and I would have said the same thing. Maybe not as... I probably would have worded it a little bit differently, but...
Well, thanks for doing the interview with me today.
Sure.
And, you mentioned the election, so just covering that first. I was wondering if you viewed your opponent, Carl Bickle, as a bigger threat this year than he was in 2014.
I don't look at him as a bigger threat. I look at a changing voter demographic. Mm-hmm. I look at the people moving into Frederick County are probably majority Democrat. Mm-hmm. I look at the fact that, you look at the obituaries every day in this county, and I see 3 or 4 people who I knew were friends of mine, maybe friends of the family. So if they voted, they probably voted for me. So figure 3 or 4 times 365 times 4 years, that's a few thousand people. So given the change of voter demographic, the people who pass away or move out of the county, I don't think it made Bickle a bigger threat. I just changed the demographic of the voter.
Okay. And does that changing demographics concern you at all?
Sure it does. I think the way I kind of read this election is going to get harder and harder for a Republican, especially a conservative guy like myself, to win a county seat.
Okay. And you're going into your 4th term now, obviously, and do you foresee a 5th term or a 6th term?
We just started. We haven't even started the 4th yet, so I'm not even going to go there.
Okay. And I want to go way back and learn more about you, because I know that you are a longtime Frederick County resident, but where exactly did you grow up?
I grew up in the city, just a couple blocks from here, on Jefferson Street and Braddock Avenue, which is just right near the Wingate community. My family, my mom and dad still live on Braddock Avenue locally, born and raised in the city, and I moved to where I currently live in Lewistown in 1983, and I've been there ever since. Okay,
wow. And what are some of your memories of growing up in Frederick County at the time?
Oh, well, it was a different county. It was largely farm community. There were only a couple of high schools in Frederick County. Played a lot of sports, baseball, high school sports. I wrestled. Just had an awful lot of friends all over the city of Frederick, and just had a lot of good times. It was a great place to grow up, a great place to be a kid. And gosh, I remember as a young teenager, the old days of riding the circuit with my older buddies in the race cars, hot rods around town. So a lot of good times.
Okay. And I know that in Lewistown you are also, and still are, unless I'm incorrect, a member of the volunteer fire department?
I am. I'm a member of the fire department, although I don't run calls. I still do administrative duties, and I help at fundraisers when I can. I'm a member of the Lewistown Ruritan Club. I'm a member of Monoxy Pistol Club. So I still maintain those relationships and those organizations because it's important. It's part of my life.
Yeah. And I don't know if we ever talked about this, but have you ever run calls for the fire department?
Oh, yeah, for years.
Wow. What inspired you to do that?
Actually, that's probably what got me going into law enforcement. I started out as a volunteer firefighter, then I got my EMT status and ran rescue calls, on an ambulance and so forth. And then it kind of made me take a deeper interest into public safety, public service. And so that kind of, I guess, transitioned into, I want to get into law enforcement.
Okay. But law enforcement wasn't your first career, was it?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
No.
What did you do first?
I worked for Communications Satellite Corporation, short ComSat for short, for 16 years. I got to a point in my career where I really didn't like that field anymore. It was actually during the time when corporate America was kind of downsizing, people were losing jobs, and I just looked at that field as maybe a dead end for me. So I kind of made a decision that I'd like to get into law enforcement, and Sheriff Bob Snyder, who I will always owe my career to, gave me that opportunity.
Okay, how did he give you the opportunity?
Well, it's really funny because went through the hiring process, physical agility, the background and everything, and then when I met with the sheriff in person, he asked me why I wanted to get into law enforcement, and I told him the reasons why, and he saw that I was going to take like a 65% pay cut from the private sector to being a deputy sheriff, and he said, well, you know what? He said, if you're crazy enough to take that pay cut, I'm just crazy enough to hire you, give you a chance. And I owe him everything I've become in law enforcement, and now as a sheriff, I owe to Bob Snyder.
And what answer did you give him when he asked why you wanted to do
just
law
I felt like I wanted a career to give back to the community and just, public service and again, public safety type job, and really had an interest and a deep desire for it. And that's what never did I think I'd be sitting here as sheriff of Frederick County.
Okay.
Never.
Was there a culture shock or any transitional difficulty when you went into law enforcement?
The only thing for me is I was a little bit old going into it. I was like 34 years old starting a law enforcement career. That's a little bit tough.
Why?
Physically demanding. It's a young man's game. So I went through the police academy at 34 years old, went out onto the street a couple years, quickly transitioned to a criminal investigator where I spent the majority of my career.
Okay. And why the county law enforcement rather than city police? Because I know you grew up in the city.
Well, because I lived in the county, I guess I had my network of relationships is more in the county probably now than definitely now, but at that time, more so in the county. I also played softball and some sports with a lot of deputy sheriffs, knew a lot of the county firefighters. So it kind of, to me, it was a natural fit, more so than the city police.
Interesting. And I know that you just mentioned that you went into criminal investigation. And before we started rolling, you mentioned that there were several paths you could take once you joined the force as a deputy. Right. So why did you want to do criminal investigation?
Well, it's kind of was forced onto me. But again, the best thing that ever happened. So 3 years on patrol, I had a knack for doing criminal cases. Wasn't big on traffic stops, wasn't big on DUIs, things like that. I just had a knack for, if I'd get a criminal complaint, I'd follow up on the case and I'd do the investigation and make the arrest. And that's not done a lot in uniform, okay? It's simply not the time. But I was fairly good at it, I guess. But Sheriff Harbaugh, who was the next sheriff after Sheriff Snyder, brought me into the office one day and said, Chuck, he said, what do you think about becoming a detective? And at the time I said, you know what, I appreciate the offer. I'm really not interested. I still want to be in uniform. I still like the road. He said, well, I appreciate that. I respect that. But being a suit and tie Monday morning, you're a detective. So it really, again, it launched me into a career path that I felt I did extremely well with.
And are there any cases that really stick out to you?
There are a couple of high-profile cases. A couple homicide cases. Can't think of the name off the top of my head, but anyway, some high-profile cases. And I'll tell you, one particular case, two that stand out in my mind that really, one's kind of humorous, but I chased down a cattle rustler back in the early 2000s.
Really?
The last cattle rustler in Frederick County, and tracked the stolen Holstein heifer calves, up into Pennsylvania, went to the livestock auctions, got them all back. The guy went to prison for about 8 years.
How did you track them down?
Through the auctions, through the tags on the cows, the purchases, just through the paper trail, and also, witness statements all up through Pennsylvania. And so I did a pretty good job on that. And actually, I was awarded, given an honorary membership into the Frederick County Farm Bureau for doing that. But what was really rewarding is the fact that this guy was the biggest thief in Frederick County for years. Nobody could ever put him behind bars, and I was finally able to do it off the cattle rustling case.
That's so interesting. Did he do other types of theft?
Oh he'd steal everything that wasn't nailed down. But the other case that's really rewarding is a young lady who lived in Jefferson at the time, was a victim of a home invasion rape back in Halloween of 2001. And the suspect entered the home. It was a true stranger rape situation. He brutalized this young girl. He raped her. He sodomized her. Every imaginable act of brutality you can imagine, and left her for dead. And she survived. I got the investigation. I investigated the entire case, and I identified the guy, arrested. He was convicted of 7 life sentences, And he committed suicide before he went to prison. After the trial, a couple days later, he committed suicide in jail. So to this day, what's really, really rewarding is to this day, this young lady who is now living in Colorado, she'll send me a Christmas card. Not every year, but every couple of years I'll hear from her a Christmas card, and she still thinks I'm a detective. She doesn't know that. She says, "Detective Jenkins, thank you for changing and making a difference in my life. You allowed me to go on. I'm happy. I'm married. I've got kids." So those are the things you really remember that mean something.
Yeah. And on the other side of the coin, were there any hard lessons you had to learn as a detective, or any regrets?
No regrets. No regrets. You learn a lot of hard lessons. I was always very careful about charging someone. I had to be really, really, it's easy to charge someone, but you have to be convinced. You have an obligation ethically to be convinced that you can get a conviction in that case, especially when it comes to allegations of sexual assault, rape, things like that, because they change lives. And just the stigma of being charged with something like that, it sticks with you for a lifetime. So you learn tough lessons. You learn along the way. You don't get a conviction in every case, but you do the right thing. You do your very best to get the bad guys off the street and help the victims. And if you do that, you've done your job.
Right. And I think you did that for 16 years before you decided to make your first run as sheriff.
Correct.
And relatively speaking, of course, that's not an incredibly long time in law enforcement.
No.
So I was wondering, what motivated you to decide, I want to be sheriff?
It's funny because think back, 16 years at ComSat, 16 years as a deputy sheriff, and now I'll have 16 years as sheriff. That's quite a lifetime of, if it stops there. But no, you know what? I never would have imagined as a deputy sheriff for a lot of years that I would ever given that a shot. But when Sheriff Hagee retired in 2006, and he made the announcement that he wasn't going to run again, I worked for him for 12 years. A lot of respect for him, and I just thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a shot. I think I can do this job. I think I've got some ideas. I've got a vision for things that I see are important. And I just threw my hat in the ring feeling I could win that. And it was a tough election, but I did prevail.
And did anyone encourage you, or was it all an internal decision?
It was an internal decision.
And did I interrupt you?
No, I was going to say, now listen, I've got friends and I've got family who, once I started talking about it and made that decision, sure, they encouraged me. But as far as personally, I made that decision. And I knew there was a lot of risk to it.
And what were those risks?
Well, I could have lost my job. I mean, you run against somebody and you don't win, chances are you're not going to be around long. It just works that way.
Okay.
So I knew everything was on the line, and I also knew that if I did win that election, the next time around there was a risk that I could lose the next election. So you have to think about it a lot. You think about what's important to you. You think about, what you have to be willing to put everything on the line.
And for you in 2006, you mentioned seeing some things that you would like to change and issues that you saw as pressing for Frederick County. And what were those at the time?
Well, some of the issues, I felt there should have been more focus on going after the bad guys, the fight against the narcotics. I felt like we could have done a better job in criminal investigations, more focus on that. I felt like I could do things, I could make other decisions in terms of how the agency would move forward from there. And I just had some ideas. And one of the biggest things, I get criticized for now, and I felt at that time was really important. What can we do then, as now, the same thought about this whole problem of illegal immigration. People in this country are illegally committing crimes in this county. And when I was running for sheriff the first time, that's one of the thoughts I had was when it was really starting to be a growing problem then, 12 years ago. Nobody realized it, but I saw it because I was on the street. So what can we do about this problem? I looked into the 287 program, and I kind of made that a piece of my campaign at that time because I felt that strongly about it.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about that because that's obviously been, something that's been widely discussed during your tenure as sheriff. And was there a moment for you where immigration did become a focal point?
Sure. Again, during my first campaign for sheriff, it became maybe not so much a focal point, it's not the right term for it, but it became an important piece of why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I just felt it was that important to the people of Frederick County, because if you think about that time, the criminal gang problem was just beginning here in Frederick County. Nobody was honest about it, except me, that it was here. The police chief at the time denied there was a gang problem. Nobody else, it wasn't on anybody else's radar. And I really felt it was a growing problem. And now, 12 years later, we see it is a problem.
So what specific crimes were you seeing back then?
I was seeing sexual assaults. I was seeing rape. I was seeing a lot of fraud, property crimes, drug activity, dealing drugs by people who were in this county committing those crimes and in this country illegally. And nothing was being done about it.
And I wanted to go back because I know that the county joined the 287G program in 2008.
Correct.
Is that correct? And that's something that's attracted a lot of scrutiny. But what was your thinking at the time when you decided to join with that program?
Well, just like I explained, I felt that was going to be in time a major problem. And as we see now, there are a lot of issues surrounding illegal immigration. My stand on that is strictly from a public safety standpoint. I want to make the decisions in this county that keep you safe and your family safe and let you sleep at night. Okay. And I think that's a large part of the issue. If you look 15 miles down the road at Montgomery County and you look at the crimes, increasing amount of crimes committed by people in this country illegally, specifically MS-13 and criminal gangs, and we don't have that problem here, there's one reason: the 287G program.
And even back in 2008, was it fair to say that it really was a dominant problem in Frederick County?
I can't say dominant. It's a small piece of the problem, but it's a component. So if you try to eliminate a problem one piece at a time, eventually you're going to make the situation better. And as much attention as that program gets, it's about 1% of what we actually do. Very minimal amount of time involved in the program, but it's very effective.
And how would you say that it's been effective?
Well, when I tell you that we have taken over 1,600 criminals off the streets and out of this country, people who have committed crimes in Frederick County and were here illegally, and they're gone, and more than 100 of those were criminal gang members, I think that speaks for itself. And when you look at the fact we've got the lowest crime rate in the region, that's a piece of the reason why. Not the entire reason why, but a piece of it.
Okay. And I wanted to go back again to 2006 when you first started running for sheriff. And I know that at the time you had been the chairman of the Republican Central Committee.
Right.
And that had been going on for the last 4 years in 2006?
Yeah, well, I was on the Central Committee for a total of 7.5 years. I got appointed to fill a position at some point 7.5 years earlier. And again, I was interested in politics. At that point, it never occurred to me to run for sheriff. It was just something I'm interested in as a little something on the side, and again, be a part of this community, be a part of Frederick County. So I was involved for 7.5 years, 5 of those as chairman, the last 5, until I ran for sheriff.
Okay. And how did you get so interested in politics?
Well, because, again, I'm interested in what happens in this county, in the decision makers, who's representing me, what decisions are you making as a delegate, as a county commissioner at the time, and I think it's important to be involved. So I just felt like I could contribute, and I did. I helped good people get elected. I supported some of the Republican candidates very, very wholeheartedly, put a lot of effort into their campaigns, and just felt like they were the right people to lead Frederick County.
Okay. And at the time in 2006, you've since become known for speaking out on national issues as well, right, including immigration, including narcotics. But would you say that you were as interested in those issues back in 2006?
Probably not, because again, if you think back to 2006, they weren't as big a problem then as they are now. I just believe so much in these issues that affect our country and our county, and I'm not afraid to speak out. I think people need to speak out more, because I think so many people feel the way I do, they're afraid to say it vocally. They might sit around their dinner table and have that conversation, but they're afraid to say it publicly.
And why do you think that is?
Because of the backlash, political backlash, in the sense if you're an elected official, if you're a private person. I mean, typically those conversations aren't discussed at parties, but again, if people were honest with themselves, I believe a whole lot more people feel the same way as I do. Okay, they're just afraid to say it.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
And it's interesting to me that you've never been someone who has been afraid of sharing his views. And for you, what makes you so willing to speak out?
Well, because I believe in what I believe in, and I'm not afraid to say it or speak it or let people know. If you ask me, I'm going to tell you. You might not like the answer, but I'm going to tell you. And again, everything I do, I really truly do it in the best interest of the people of this county. Again, so you can live here, you can raise your family here, you can work here without worry, and you can sleep well at night.
Yeah. And to play devil's advocate, though, what would you say to people who would say that, you know, as leader of the sheriff's office in Frederick County, you should not be a partisan figure, that it is your job to enforce the laws, not speak out on them?
I do, yeah, okay. I you know what? That's a good argument. But this is what I do believe. You can't deny the fact that anybody's political beliefs affects their decision making or their ideology or how they think, and those things impact the decisions you make. So to say anything strictly bipartisan or not partisan, I don't think is accurate. I just don't. I don't think you can hold an elected position without having strong views one way or the other.
Okay.
I mean, your thought processes affect your decisions.
And do you think that your political beliefs have motivated your enforcement in other ways?
I think people have come to know me as a no-nonsense type sheriff, a law and order guy. I just believe strongly that bad guys belong in jail. Okay, we go after drug dealers. We go after drug traffickers. I'm just a law and order, no-nonsense guy.
Okay. And, you know, you mentioned how much Frederick County has changed over the years, and some of that is demographic changes and obviously influx of, you know, a lot of liberal commuters who are working in the city. But then there's also been, you know, racial and lingual demographic shifts as well. And I was wondering, given that, do you think it's still appropriate to be so outspoken against immigration and for 287G?
Yes, I don't have a problem, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look at, let's talk about the Latino community, the immigrant community, if you will. Largely, they are the victims of the criminals who are in the country illegally. So where I'm coming from is that, listen, I'm protecting them too, probably more so than the average Frederick County citizen. So I don't see anything inappropriate about what I say.
Okay. And have you?
And everything I say is fact. I can back it up with numbers, statistics. You know, there was all these allegations during the election that the program costs Frederick County money. No, it doesn't. There was all these allegations that I'm breaking up families and I'm incarcerating children. Not one time have we ever done that. We haven't impacted families. We don't put kids in jail. We don't put juveniles from the immigrant community in jail. We just don't do that. That's all rhetoric. That's all because somebody doesn't like what the sheriff is doing in enforcing the law. Okay.
And so explain for people who might not understand, can you explain how the 287G program actually works in practice?
Very simply put is this. Everybody that commits a crime in Frederick County comes to our detention center. All right. You have to be physically arrested for anything, any reason, to come to our jail. We don't ask any questions on the street in regard to immigration status. Nothing. If it's a traffic stop, any type of call for service, investigating a crime, any type of incident, we ask nothing on the street about your immigration status. If you're arrested, if I were to arrest Kate right now and take you to jail with me, I might do that. We would ask you a series of questions, and two of those questions are, where were you born and what country are you a citizen of? And any other answer than the United States of America, we conduct an immigration check. And we determine whether or not you're here in this country illegally. And if you're not, you're still charged with the crime that you went to jail for. But aside from that, we prepare the paperwork, we file a detainer, so once we're done with you for the local charge, you're now in the custody of ICE, and they decide what to do with you. The sheriff doesn't. I have no impact on that program. It's very simply put, once you're arrested, you're screened, you're processed. We determine your immigration status through a series of questions and interview processes, and then ICE decides what they're going to do with you.
Oh, And I do know, do you have comment on the 2008 case where it was recently decided that you did detain a woman unlawfully?
Well, let's first of all say that had absolutely nothing to do with the 287G program, nothing at all. Two officers doing their job, making a daytime patrol check, encountered this woman who she was sitting along the curb by a storage container in the back of a mall eating her lunch. Now, when she saw the police car coming, she got up and ran. Well, to any good police officer, that's going to get your attention, right? It's like a red flag, like why is she running from the police? Typically, you've done something wrong, you've committed a crime, or maybe you're wanted, okay? They stopped, got out of the car, confronted the lady, said, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Everything all right? Got some identification. They ran her name and date of birth. There was an outstanding warrant for removal for immigration violations, okay? At that time, and we're talking, 9 years ago? At that point in time, an immigration warrant was considered a criminal warrant and you were placed under arrest. Any police agency would have done that. That's now since changed, okay, where an immigration warrant is now considered a civil warrant. We don't arrest you now. At the time, any law enforcement officer would have arrested that woman. At the direction of ICE, because there was an immigration warrant on her, open on her, she was wanted. She was taken into custody by deputies, turned over to ICE, and they made the decision to detain her. So consequently, she filed suit through some of the ACLU and Casa de Maryland, some of those organizations, with pro bono attorneys. And over the years now, they've made the arguments, and I don't think it was defended appropriately, because I don't think the argument was ever really made that when this occurred, the law was different than it is now. We were judged on the way the law is now, when the actions that were taken were based on how the law was in 2007 or 8, whenever that was. So we'll see.
And it's decided she did win her case.
Well, they've decided that I was liable, that not the deputy's actions, but me as a policymaker or decision maker was liable for that action. We'll see where it goes.
The Supreme Court refused to hear the appeal. Is that
Correct.
where it stands now?
Yes,
okay.
right.
And do you personally feel that you were liable?
No, I don't. I think that was a wrong decision by the federal district court judge who made that decision. I think I think it was made on emotion because of the situation or the current situation with illegal immigration. I don't think it was made on fact. But again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not the judge. She made the decision. So now I have to, we as Frederick County have to suffer the consequences.
And as a general rule, do you think that illegal immigration is still a threat largely?
It is going to be the biggest. Illegal immigration is the biggest singular threat to this country that you're going to see in your lifetime.
How
in a lot of ways.
How so?
Well, let's just talk about public. I only speak to public safety and national security issues, okay? So, again, when you look at the gang crime that's growing throughout this country, the gang threat, transnational gangs like MS-13, 18th Street, Sinaloa and Cowboys, the cartels that are coming into this country pushing drugs, heroin, you look at that. You look at the criminal element that's coming through the borders every day. You look at known terror cells that are coming into this country through our open borders every single day as part of the illegal immigration problem. So you set that aside. So what else do we have to worry about? The cost of illegal immigration. The cost to you, the taxpayer. We cannot continue to sustain this much longer. We really can't. The Americans can't afford to continue to pay for the services, the health care, the education, the cost of public safety, the cost of incarceration, all these things that we bear the cost of. We cannot solve the problems of the world in this country. Now, we can solve a lot of these other problems by solving them in their countries. But probably half the world's population is running from something, either government tyranny or some type of violence or poverty. We can't sustain the population of the world here in America. So this is going to be the biggest singular thing that you see in your lifetime that's going to impact America.
And of course, I will say that the economic impact of illegal immigration versus efforts that we take to enforce it is still debated. But for you...
There's no debate, Kate. There's no debate in this. Whatever it would cost to build this wall and enforce the law is only a fraction of what it's going to cost us if we do nothing.
And how long have you held that opinion?
For a long time, for a lot of years.
Yeah. And I think that some people too, wonder for you as a Maryland, why it's such a big concern for you, whereas given our how far away we are from the border.
Well, the drug dealers, the criminals, don't stay in border counties. They infiltrate the country, the entire country. This is really the central Maryland area. Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and even Frederick to some degree are really a destination point for MS-13. They are actively recruiting from this region. Now Frederick County has at this point, I would say a problem that's continuing to develop. Okay, the only reason it hasn't taken a foothold here the way it has in Montgomery County is because of the program.
Okay.
So I just think, I don't care where you're located. If we do nothing about this problem, every county in America becomes a border county.
Okay. And I only want to ask a few more questions
Sure.
about this, but one thing that I wonder as well is whether you do have empathy for,
I do. Listen, I truly have I understand the fact that everybody on the face of this planet wants to come to America for a better way of life, for opportunities, for better jobs, to raise their families, to live in a law-abiding, a lawful environment, okay? But the fact is, Kate, we can't take everybody here. There's got to be a controlled immigration process. We have to do it in a way that's legal. People have to come here legally. We just can't continue to take on the numbers of people that continue to want to come to America. We won't last long.
And I know that in a 2013 piece from The Guardian, you were compared to Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, and you were called the Joe Arpaio of Maryland. And of course, there has been criticism that the policies are racist. And I was wondering, do you agree with that? Do you think there's any validity to those statements?
I don't know what it means to be compared to Sheriff Arpaio. I don't know that it means anything other than the hype of the media. Do I think it's racist? Do I think that's fair? No, but when you have no other argument, it's easy to call the sheriff a racist. When you have no other backlash, you can't think of another reason to justify and to say, well, what he's doing is wrong, you call him a racist. And that's the easy way.
Okay.
You can't make the argument for illegal immigration, so you call me a racist because I'm opposed to it.
And I know that 287G is something, that you have touted as a success in Frederick County. But going into your fourth term as sheriff, what do you think some of your other big successes have been? Well,
we've had a lot of successes. Right now, one of our biggest successes is we are doing more and more to fight this opioid, this heroin crisis, okay? We are really becoming more and more effective all the time at going after some of these drug dealers, mid-level and major dealers. We're taking them off the streets. We're getting good at it. We've got one of the premier, I'll say, maybe that's not the right word, but one of the model school resource officers in the state of Maryland. Everybody models theirs after Frederick County because we do it right, and we're very effective at it. Our patrol strategies, our directed patrols, again, we've got the lowest crime rate in the entire region. Now, not all of that is because of how we do our things on patrol and our strategies, but we're very effective at it. We just do a lot of things well. Now, priorities change. Okay, they could change on a dime tomorrow. There could be another set of problems that come to me that we're not even talking about today. But one of the major things going forward is going to be school security. What is adequate school security going to look like a year from now? And we've got to be ready for that. So we've got a great agency. We've got very dedicated men and women that work there on the law enforcement side, on the corrections side. And listen, there's always going to be people who are in opposition to what you do. But I can look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, Chuck, you made what you believe truly in your heart is the right decision for the right reason. I can stand by that.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me that you mentioned school security.
Right.
And I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you've also discussed you're a staunch Second Amendment supporter.
Right.
And so how do you square that away with an environment where children are literally getting shot in schools?
I think it's sad as a society that we're sitting here talking about school violence or shooters going into schools and killing their children. I mean, a decade ago we would never had this conversation. Okay, a school should be a secure environment. There's no doubt about that. But the problem is now in the society we live in, we've got to protect these kids, and I'm all for that. We do the very best we can. I think it's impossible or almost improbable to think there's going to be a deputy in every school. We just number one, if you gave me the money to hire the people, it would take me 10 years to hire enough deputies to do it. It's just the people simply aren't there. That's another challenge for us is hiring, but school security is going to be a priority for us going forward. We do it very well right now, but the law is going to change next year, and we don't know what to expect. So we've got to gear up to put maybe more deputies in schools, maybe change the way we look at our school security system. How do we do even better at what is a priority?
Okay. And do you have any concrete steps for ways that you think could increase school security or what you'd like to see?
I've got to know what they're looking for first. I've got to know what comes down from this Maryland Department of School Safety or Maryland Center for School Safety. I've got to hear from them what they expect of us. Once we know what to expect, then we can deal with it. We can craft our program going forward. So I just need to know what to look for.
Yeah. And this is something that I've always been curious to ask, but I think that sometimes what's minimized in the cases of these mass shootings is that deputies and law enforcement are often the ones hurt. They're victimized because they go in to defend.
They get killed first.
They do. They get killed first. And so I was wondering, just philosophically, how you can, still be so staunchly, a defender of the Second Amendment when sometimes it does end.
Well, because I just am. I just am a believer that bad things or bad people are going to come up with a way to harm people, regardless of the gun laws. Okay, not one of these people that's committed one of these acts got the guns legally. Probably. I mean, I don't know in every single case, but listen, there are so many mental health issues out there. I'm just a very staunch Second Amendment guy. I believe in gun ownership, the right to own firearms, either for self-defense, sports shooting, whatever the case may be. But it's not the gun, it's society and the people that make these decisions to do this.
And I wanted to revisit quickly the opioid epidemic as well, because you have addressed things, you've talked a lot about how you go after the bad guys, you go after drug dealers.
Right.
But your department has also expanded the use of sort of more defensive tactics. You all carry naloxone now, right? All your deputies?
Right. We do administer Narcan, naloxone, Narcan. We've actually, since 2014, when we started to carry and administer Narcan, I think the number of lives we've saved is probably at about 113, I think. So that's quite a few lives of people that are living and breathing because of our administering Narcan. So yeah, we do have an obligation to go out there and save a life where we can. Absolutely.
And short of enforcement, are there other measures that you would like the county to take to help tackle this problem?
Well, this is where I go with this question all the time. It's not a problem that the sheriff is going to solve. It's not a problem that the county executive is going to solve. These problems, and it's not the heroin, okay? It's the addiction problem. Heroin is just a flavor of the day. That's just the drug of choice right now. That's going to shift and that's going to change. You better hope we don't see crystal meth here, okay? You better hope that never comes. But heroin right now is what's on the street. It's the most deadly thing out there. And I'm just not sure that the public, if it's public health, the county executive, the sheriff, we're not going to solve that problem. We can throw money, we can throw resources, strategies out there to fight it. That problem is going to be solved in the home, around the dinner table, within the family.
Okay. And do you know anyone personally who's been affected by that?
I do. Yeah, I do. Sure do.
Could you tell me about it?
I've got a family in Thurmont actually two families in Thurmont who were, they're friends of ours as families, and they both lost sons through heroin overdose. And it hurts. It hits home. And listen, they were good families. They raised their kids the right way. They were good young men. They played sports with my son. My son knew them both very well. Their sons are dead. My son is survived, or he's alive. He's doing well in life. He's going to do very well. And so what's the difference? Am I just lucky? I don't know. I am lucky, very lucky, but it has impacted us. They're good families, and they lost their sons, and sure, it hurts.
And was that the moment for you where you realized that this is an epidemic?
No, I was aware of the problem long before they overdosed and died. I mean, this has been a problem that we started to see in about 2012. Mm. So we started to see the increased use of heroin 2012 into 2013. We'd gone decades in Frederick County and didn't see any heroin.
Interesting.
So it all started to show up in the 2012 time frame, and it's only got progressively worse.
Okay. And we've touched on the epidemic, we've touched on school security, and now that you're entering your fourth term, are there any other major priorities for you moving forward?
Hiring, finding qualified, capable young men and women who want to get into law enforcement and can pass the background. That is probably the major challenge right now.
Why is it such a challenge?
Well, the pool of people who are interested is getting smaller. We're competing with other agencies. You got people who, there's a process. There's a written test, a physical agility, an interview process, and then a background. And boy, do they wash out in the backgrounds.
How?
Well, drug use, theft issues, sex crime issues, and the decisions they're making at a young point in their life between the ages of 18 and 21 are bad decisions, and they're keeping them out of law enforcement.
Yeah, and you hear about problems in law enforcement recruitment, across the country.
Right.
And why do you think the pool of interested candidates is getting smaller?
Well, there's so many job opportunities out there, okay? And over the last 5 or 6 years, you've seen like a sentiment against law enforcement. So I think that's kind of discouraged people from getting into it. I don't think that's the case locally, but I think nationally at the bigger level, that's been a part of the problem. I just think there's other opportunities. Kids want something. Young people want something now that's going to, they want all the pay up front. They want the great pay and benefits now. They're not willing to come in some cases, not all cases. They don't want to start at the bottom. They want to sit behind a computer and make $80,000 or $90,000 a year. Everybody can't do that. But I would say the number one problem is the shrinking pool of applicants. And even probably as big a problem is getting through the backgrounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned one thing that I wanted to sort of probe further was you mentioned that you felt that there's been growing sentiment that's sort of anti-law enforcement.
Right.
And is that something that you see here locally?
No, not so much locally, but I'm talking on a bigger scale nationally. Under the previous administration, the Justice Department, the administration of the president seemed to be focused against law enforcement. Everything we did was wrong. Everything, we did, we should have done a different way. Shouldn't have used that use of force, whatever. Under this current administration and Department of Justice, I believe the winds have shifted. The public is probably more supportive in law enforcement. I think, we've never seen an anti-law enforcement sentiment locally. We've never seen that. This is a great county to police in. It really is. People treat us very well here.
And did you think, the criticism that you mentioned by the previous administration, do you think any of that was valid on a national scale?
You mean criticism against law enforcement?
Yeah, when it comes to use of force or, tactics against civilians.
No, because generally what you would hear was before any of the real facts were known. It would be just a statement, a blanket statement about an incident opposed to what law enforcement did. Listen, I'm a believer in you investigate an incident, and the facts are what the facts are, and then you put it out. You don't make a decision before the facts are known, and in many cases that's what happened. Law enforcement was judged at the first view of an event, and that's just not the right way to do it.
Do you think that's ever happened with your department?
I can't say that. We've been very lucky that we haven't had a lot of bad things happen. We've had officer-involved shootings, which were justified. The deadly force was justified. The one case that we were really, I think, unfairly judged on up front was the Ethan Saylor case. Yeah. The young man in the theater. That's the one incident that happened that the public judged the agency and the deputies before any of the information and the results of the investigation came out. And that was unfair.
And how do you think it was unfair specifically?
Well, because people believed they knew what happened, And things, again, I go back to my comment before the interview started about social media, the bad part of social media. People were saying everything about what happened was absolute, and which was absolutely not true. But it gets out there in social media, people start to believe it, they see it. For some reason, people think that everything said in social media is true. It's not. And I just think that we were judged wrongly, harshly. It was a bad situation. It had a bad outcome, but I will stand to this day on the fact that deputies did nothing inappropriate.
Okay, because I know that in that case, the autopsy did show that it was a death by suffocation due to a crushed larynx after the altercation with the deputies. And do you still feel that every action taken in that case by the deputies was defensible?
Because, well, you're a little off base there, because my belief is the damage to the larynx was from the intubation, the attempt to intubate this young man. The deputies never had him in a chokehold. The deputies never did anything to his throat. They went to the floor, okay, and one of the deputies went down semi on top of him on the floor, but nobody ever choked this young man.
And did that case make you do any moral introspection of your own, or was it difficult for you emotionally at the time?
Listen, sure it was. Sure it was. It was difficult for the deputies. It was difficult for the agency. Sure, I think about it. And I felt bad for the family and the young man. But again, I have to stand by the fact that I know the facts of the case, and I know that those deputies did absolutely nothing wrong in the way they handled that situation.
Did it lead to any internal policy changes?
It did. I tell you, I went out and sought a block of training on how to deal with and how to interact with adults and young people that had, I'll say, intellectual disabilities. And it was good for the agency. But no real policy changes, but just additional training.
Okay.
Sure.
And I guess the only other question I have for you is, what are you most looking forward to in your first year of your next term?
Well, I'm looking to again, listen, we're not going to just stop and change course. We're doing a good job. The men and women of the sheriff's office are doing a good job out there. We're not going to change much of anything in the way we're doing. What we look for is a shift in priorities. We're always looking at what's going to change tomorrow. What are we going to have to do differently? What's going to be the focus? What's going to be the most important thing that happens tomorrow that we have to deal with? And we're going to stay the course. Listen, I want to be able to hire the best people that I can find to work for us. That's always a pleasure to do. Again, one of the biggest things that I have to look at is this school security piece. That's going to be a big thing. The public is going to demand it. They expect it, and rightfully so.
Great. Well, are you ready to move into the fun portion of the interview
Let's
now?
go.
Are you ready?
Is this like quick shot questions? Or?
You can take as long as you want.
Okay.
But first of all, I have to ask, so I think you've told me a little bit about this in the past,
Right.
But your favorite TV show is Andy Griffith?
It is.
Okay.
I've liked that since I was a kid. I won't deny it, and you might make fun of it, but yes.
Did that make you want to become a cop? Is that one of the motivating?
No, I just enjoy the show because it's old school. It's funny, and I'm 62 years old, and I can sit down today, and I've seen every episode probably 20, 30 times, and I can still get a good belly laugh out of it. Okay? Mm-hmm. And there's always a lesson to be learned out of every show. And I think it's neat. I'm old school, and my other favorite show is Blue Bloods. I love that show.
I don't know if I've heard of Blue Bloods.
Well, every Friday night, 10 o'clock, Tom Selleck is the commissioner.
Okay.
So,
what about your favorite movie of all time?
Wow. I don't know if I have a favorite movie. My favorite Western of all time is Lawman with Burt Lancaster.
Can you sing me the Lawman theme song?
I could, but I'm not going to.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
I'm a dog guy.
Okay.
I'm a dog person. I despise cats.
You hate them?
I can't stand a cat.
I have a cat.
Yeah, I like Kate. I just don't like Kate.
And do you have any pets at home now?
No, we lost our dog about a year ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
14-year-old German short hair, and we lost her, and she lived a good life. And, with everybody going their separate directions and kids grown, I'll get another dog some point, but not right now.
Okay. Are you a pie guy or a cake guy?
Oh, I'm a pie guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite pie?
Oh, probably Trinity Church coconut cream.
That's very specific. Trinity Church.
Only from the Trinity Church in Thurmont.
Wow.
Tootie Lenhart and Rush DeLauder. They make the best pies in the world.
And if you could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead, who would you have dinner with?
Wow. Probably Condoleezza Rice would be one.
Wow, okay.
I think she is one of the smartest people I've ever seen in government and in public life. I just think she's phenomenally interesting to have a conversation with. I can't think of 2 other people. I don't know. Maybe Donald. Well, I've been around Donald Trump, but
you would want to sit down with him again?
I would. I would.
Okay.
Yeah, just to pick his brain.
Okay. I know that he eats his steak well done. Do you?
No.
No? How do you like it
Medium.
cooked? Medium? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. What about your alcoholic drink of choice?
Coors Light.
Coors Light? Okay. Do you have a favorite book of all time?
Not really. No, I read a fair amount.
Yeah.
A lot of World War II history, a lot of books. I don't read fiction. I read, true stories, events, things like that.
Do you have a favorite commander from World War II?
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower?
Bold, not afraid to make a decision.
Okay. What would you say that your biggest hobbies are outside the office?
Shooting sporting clays, trap shooting, shotgun sports, things like that. I like to hunt. Don't have time to fish much anymore. I used to like to fish. I still would enjoy it if I had time to do it, but I would have to say I'm really hooked on sporting clays.
Okay. And what do you hunt when you hunt?
Deer.
Deer guy?
And some turkey, yeah.
Okay. What's your astrological sign?
Gemini.
Gemini? I'm a Gemini.
Oh, there you go.
What's your birthday?
May 27th.
Mine's May 26th.
Oh,
interesting.
see you there?
Okay. And do you have a favorite restaurant in Frederick?
Not a favorite. I tell you what, I like the mom and pop restaurants. Mm-hmm. I typically find myself going to some of the mom and pops. Yeah. China Garden's one of my favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite dish at China Garden?
Either General's chicken or shrimp fried rice, one or the other.
Okay. Yeah. And what's your favorite food? If you had to eat one food for the rest of time, what would you eat?
Well, you're asking tough questions. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about your family.
Okay. I'm married. I got a son and a daughter. My son is 24. My daughter is 20. My son actually works for me right now. Just came on board. And my daughter is a junior in college.
Okay. And were you encouraging your son to join law enforcement?
No, you know what? I didn't. I didn't encourage. I didn't discourage.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. He graduated Mount St. Mary's through the ROTC program. He's a commander, actually a second lieutenant in the National Guard. And I was kind of shocked when he applied to come to work for us.
Really? Why?
I knew he was looking at federal law enforcement. He had talked about that, in his early years of college. And I just always looked at he'd go another direction. And he started doing some ride-alongs with us. And I guess the biggest thing is he's known so many of the guys that I've worked with. He grew up seeing my generation of guys who work for the sheriff's office, and he's become close to all of them. And he decided that's what he wanted to do. And he went through the process like everybody else. And he made it. He's there, and see where it goes.
Are you proud? Are you
sure
proud?
Sure I am. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long have you been married now?
25, 29 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
Actually, in EMT class.
Oh, okay.
I was taking my EMT test, and my wife was my victim for the hair traction splint.
Did you? And so you just were victimizing her, working on her?
Yeah, something like that. Working on her is a better word than victimizing her.
How did you ask her out?
Through the class, just ask her out. She actually knew my brother and my family before I knew her.
Okay.
So she was kind of like friends with the family.
Okay. And do you see yourself retiring in Frederick County when you do?
I don't like Frederick the way it's headed in taxes. I don't know if it's going to be affordable to live here. Listen, this is my home. I love Frederick County. I love the people here. I would like to say yes, and I expect it would be, but who knows?
And what about vacations? What's the last vacation you took?
I haven't had a vacation in a long time. I just don't tend to take vacation. I take time off to hunt with my son and take a day here and day there, but I probably haven't taken a vacation in Gosh, 9, 10 years.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever traveled outside the country?
Nope, I have no desires. One place I'd love to go, I'd love to go to Normandy, France.
Normandy, France.
The only place I really have a desire to go.
Okay, but nowhere else, you don't think?
Not outside the country, no.
What about in America?
I've traveled a fair amount when I was with ComSat. Saw a lot of places, a lot of cities, pretty much all over the country. So I had my share of travel. I get to some sheriff's conferences across the country. Salt Lake City was probably one of my favorite places.
Really?
Kentucky's beautiful, yeah.
What about Salt Lake City? I've never
It's
been.
just beautiful, just the mountains, the scenery. I've been out west to hunt a few times, Colorado, Idaho. So
Okay.
we got a beautiful country here. I have no desire whatsoever to travel outside these borders.
Fair. Yeah. And what would you say are 2 facts that your constituents don't know about you?
I don't know that there's anything people don't know about me. I mean, my life's like an open book. I don't know what they wouldn't know.
Okay.
I mean, you've talked about all my involvements. I'm a pretty plain living guy. I'm nothing fancy. Pretty mundane, actually.
Well, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Sure.
We really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.